In this video, I'll be revealing the stark reality between retiring with 1 million versus 3 million and what each amount actually buys you in today's retirement landscape. I spent over 15 years working with hundreds of retirees, and I've discovered that the difference isn't just about the numbers. It's about completely different retirement realities that most people don't fully understand until it's often too late. If you're new to the channel, my name's Justin. I own a financial planning firm in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where we work with retirees all across the country, helping them make smarter financial decisions. And that's exactly why I'm making today's video. I want to show you the specific lifestyle differences between 1 million and 3 million in retirement. So let's dig right into it. So let's talk about the $1 million retirement reality that shocks most people. So $1 million sounds impressive. And I know that we're probably all brought up to still think of $1 million as a big, impressive amount. But when you break it down, it provides far less than most people have been conditioned to think. So at an example, 4% withdrawal rate, that's about $40,000 a year. Now you may be able to stretch this to maybe 5% or 6% withdrawals, depending on market returns, making good adjustments, but that's not guaranteed. And compare that to the US median household income of about $75,000, and you can see that there's a pretty big gap there. And that level of income can mean trade-offs. So housing, travel, even healthcare can become decisions that need to be made with careful evaluation and planning. So at this level, you can have some of what you want, but not everything that you want. And many retirees might even have to relocate to lower cost areas to make the math work. Now here in central Pennsylvania, $1 million can be pretty comfortable. I've worked with many people who've retired on just about $1 million and even less. But in New York and California, it can be a completely different story. And I think the false confidence around 1 million comes from outdated expectations. In 1990, the median home price was $117,000. Today, it's about $430,000. Healthcare and education costs have climbed even faster. And I probably don't even need to tell you how high other costs have risen since 2020. This is getting ridiculous. But so if $1 million can feel tight, what does it take to actually live the retirement that most people imagine? That's where a number like 3 million can change everything. So let's look at the $3 million retirement lifestyle that defines real financial freedom. So at 3 million, the story changes completely. At this level, a 3 to 4% withdrawal rate supports about $90,000 to $120,000 per year, which is well above the median income. And that can support a pretty comfortable lifestyle, all things being equal, especially when you add Social Security and potential pensions on top of that. So now you're a lot more likely to be able to stay in the community or state that you love instead of possibly being forced to move for affordability. You can travel more regularly, have a lot more freedom to pursue hobbies without guilt. You can maybe be more charitable if that's something that's important to you. In short, $3 million brings you the lifestyle flexibility that people used to think 1 million would get you. And of course, this higher amount brings a lot more resilience. So retirees with more financial flexibility obviously report higher life satisfaction and less stress. The psychological benefit is often a lot more valuable than the dollars themselves. And now you might be hearing this and thinking, well, yeah, of course, Justin, no duh. If you have $3 million, if you have a lot more, you're going to have less stress, less anxiety. I totally get that. What I'm trying to say in this video is that not everybody has the ability or resources or time to get to a savings level of 3 million, nor does everybody need to hit an amount that high to live the lifestyle that they want in retirement. So part of this is breaking down each to show you some of the differences, show you where some of the room is, and then figure out where exactly you might need to get to and what's realistic for you. And now that we've looked at how a $3 million lifestyle provides security, let's look at the spending comparison that shows exactly where the differences impact daily life. So housing is the first obvious divide. With $1 million, retirees might need to downsize or move to lower cost areas. With 3 million, you can usually stay where you are, buy in your preferred location, or in some cases, even add a second home if you want. And travel budgets tell the same story. $1 million can cover an occasional road trip or a modest domestic vacation, which is okay for those who maybe don't like to travel and like to stay closer to home. But 3 million allows for those bigger international trips, spontaneous family visits, better accommodations. You can afford the business class seat instead of premium economy, which I've discovered premium economy has no more legroom than regular economy. And I'm 6'5". I need all the legroom I can get. So I was not happy with premium economy legroom. But the bigger point is mindset. $1 million retirees might live in scarcity mode, constantly budgeting, monitoring, maybe worrying. $3 million retirees can find it a lot easier to live in abundance mode. And they still have psychological barriers too. I've covered that in some other videos, but they more likely to make decisions on preference, not financial anxiety. So now that you understand these lifestyle differences, if you need more help with your retirement, click the link in the description below the video. There'll be a quick questionnaire, fill it out. I will send you back a personalized video giving you my thoughts on your retirement based on your numbers and some steps that you can take to possibly improve that. And so we've discussed the differences in lifestyle, but what about investing though? $1 million and $3 million can demand completely different risk strategies. So now let's look at the risk tolerance reality that changes everything. So this is an angle a lot of people overlook. If you have $1 million and you're counting on that as your primary source of annual withdrawals and you can't deviate at all, then you don't have much room for error. So a bad sequence of returns early in retirement could potentially derail your plan completely if you don't have any flexibility to make adjustments. And I will give a disclaimer on sequence of returns risk here. It's talked about a lot as something super scary, but I found that in reality, the research on this, which I've shown before, Javier Estrada did a fantastic paper on this, showed sequence of returns risk is actually very, very rare. And it's not something retirees need to stay up at night worrying about necessarily. Sequence of returns risk only comes into play if you're continuing to make inflation-adjusted withdrawals into big market downturns and never adjusting your strategy, which I find is unrealistic. But I would say feeling like you have less flexibility forces you into more conservative investment allocations, which could limit growth and ironically make it harder to keep up with inflation and more likely that you do run out of money. Since I mentioned Javier Estrada, there's another paper that he did that I like to reference on global withdrawal rates showing that the higher equity allocation, in this instance, an 80% equity allocation, 20% secure allocation, was about the optimal sweet spot for maintaining retiree withdrawals. So you may actually need more growth if you have $1 million, $1.5 million, and you need to push that spending boundary. With an amount like $3 million, though, the cushion changes everything. You can weather downturns, take more calculated risk, even be more opportunistic when markets dip. You're not forced into necessarily selling at the bottom because you likely have more flexibility here. So to put it simply, $1 million retirees are often investing defensively out of necessity or be more or less forced to take more risk so they don't run out of money because they want to meet those spending needs. And not everybody can psychologically and emotionally handle that well. Once you understand risk, though, the next piece of the puzzle is taxes, and this is where strategy really matters. So let's talk about the tax reality that determines how far your money really goes. At $1 million, withdrawals of about, again, let's say 40 grand a year, usually keep you in lower tax brackets. That sounds great on paper, but the reality is that those low taxes only exist because your lifestyle is constrained. You're just not spending a lot. You're not paying much to the IRS, but you're not spending much on yourself either. And the goal of retirement and having wealth in the first place is to enjoy your money so it can add value to your life. And at 3 million, withdrawals of 90,000 to 120,000 a year, those push you higher up the tax ladder, especially once Social Security and RMDs start, and then if you have a pension on top of that. But many people fear that, and I understand, but it's actually just the receipt of having saved well and living the lifestyle that you want. I talk to people all the time that get so hyper-focused on the tax angle that they almost miss the forest for the trees here, that being able to spend and enjoy the money is what matters most. And that's what we want to keep as the main thing. If we can save taxes along the way, that's great, but we want to keep the focus on what matters. But at either wealth level, you do want to make sure you're taking advantage of tax planning opportunities, whether it happens to be Roth conversions, if that's something that's appropriate for you, tax efficient withdrawals, meaning which accounts are you taking money from and in what order, charitable gifting, if that's something that's important to you, tax loss harvesting, all those strategies can make a big difference. I've shown research before from Michael Kitces that shows that sequencing withdrawals across different account types can extend your portfolio life by quite a few years. And if you have an amount like 1 million, Sometimes you can just be stuck reacting or just pulling from the only source that you have. And in many cases, for a lot of people, almost everything is in their pre-tax retirement accounts. With 3 million, you may have a lot more control of when and how you pay taxes. And I'd say taxes in retirement, I like to think of it as toll booths on the highway. So if you only have a little bit of spare change laying around in the car, every toll hurts, right? You're digging in the seats to find that spare change before you get to the line, hoping you come up with enough in time. If you have a wallet full of cash, then you can keep driving. But planning your route wisely can cut the total cost dramatically, and in some cases, avoid the toll completely. So tax strategy in retirement is critical whether you have $1 million or $3 million. And so now that you understand these wealth level differences, let's look at how to determine which target aligns with your retirement vision. And so the last thing I'll talk about is the retirement vision assessment that determines your optimal target. So I'm sure the question that you might have now is, well, Justin, if I don't have 3 million, then am I out of luck? It sounds like my lifestyle is not going to be very good. The answer is no. That's not what I'm saying at all. It does mean that your strategy needs to be a lot more tailored and more precise. And as I mentioned earlier, I've worked with many people who have around $1 million or even less and are thriving in retirement. So there's so much variability there, and everything is case by case. You may not need to save 3 million to have your desired lifestyle in retirement. It just all depends. And so when I'm working with somebody, I don't want to just chase a number. I want to walk through areas that matter far more than whether you have 1 million, 5 million, or even 10 million. And so how do you determine whether a number like 1 million or 3 million aligns with your retirement vision? Well, use this simple sequence that I'll give you. It takes the guesswork out and replaces it with actual math and then intent. So step one is, what is your vision? So you want to build that lifestyle. Essentials, health, housing, your actual lifestyle preferences, include the things you really will do, not just things you hope you'll do. Focus on specific activities, not just around generic numbers. So articulate those trips, time with family, friends, hobbies, giving, all that stuff. Price that out honestly. Then step two would be to subtract guaranteed income from that number. So take Social Security, pensions, subtract it from that number, find your gap, and then you want to add taxes to the mix. So make sure you're using, I'd say you could start with a 15% effective tax rate. If your plan's kind of lean, you could go with 20 to 25% if you're spending much higher. And then step four would be, you need to use a sustainable withdrawal rate. So you can use a range rather than just one number. So for example, 3% would be very conservative, and below that, obviously more conservative. 4%, 4.5%, 5%, that can be a little bit more aggressive, require more flexibility. You can get away with spending higher than that. You just might not be able to do that every year. And that's where good adjustments and planning come into place. And so blending that all together, let's take a look at some examples. So let's say you want to spend $80,000 a year. Social Security is $35,000, 15% tax rate, 3.5% withdrawal rate. So the gap is $45,000. When you count taxes, you might need closer to $53,000. So your portfolio might need to be somewhere around 1.5 million. Then example B, if you need to spend a lot more, let's say you want to spend 150,000 and you have 50,000 in Social Security benefits, we'll give you a 22% tax rate, 3.5% withdrawal rate. So basically you have a $100,000 gap, add the taxes to it, you might need somewhere closer to 3.6 or 3.7 million. And so it's all just going to come down to your particular spending and other factors like geography, lifestyle. If you're willing to relocate, downsize smartly, or trim high-cost hobbies, you can target the lower end of that portfolio range. If you must stay in a high-cost area, you want regular international travel, or you prefer stable spending with very little adjustments, then you might need to target the higher end of that 3 million range. Risk tolerance and adaptability is going to be another big factor here. If a 20% market drop would force you to cut spending, and you know that you will not, or maybe you cannot, then I'd lower your withdrawal rate by 0.5% to a full percentage point, maybe more, and then raise your target. If you can be flexible with spending and be able to cut 5, 10, 15% in bad years and keep a cash buffer, you could probably use the middle of the range confidently. And what's going to ensure that the wealth target you select will actually support your vision long term? Well, one of the first things you want to do is make sure you're inflation proofing the plan, because that's one of the biggest factors. Recheck that spending annually, keep raises realistic, make sure you're factoring inflation into any projections you make, especially healthcare inflation. Healthcare inflation tends to run at 5, 6%, much, much higher than normal inflation for other things. So you want to make sure you're protecting those essential expenses first, and then the wants and needs can come second. The next thing you want to do is build flexibility in advance. So 2 to 3 years, maybe more. So for some people, it's a little less. Some people, it's a little more. But you want to have that safe liquidity and cash buffer for known costs. So if markets tank, if you have a bad string of returns, as I mentioned, sequence of returns risk, usually only becomes a problem if you continue taking from your investments while the markets are down. If you have that buffer, you can take from there. And you also want to have that rules-based guardrail in place to be able to trim discretionary spending if those bad markets come. Lastly, you want to use modeling to see the trade-offs before life forces you to see them. So run scenarios for all kinds of different outcomes. Run them for higher healthcare costs, early Social Security, delayed Social Security, part-time work scenario. Maybe you have a one-time large expense. How are all these things going to impact the plan? You want to make sure that you can see what the possibilities are and then be able to have a contingency plan to know, okay, if this happens, here's how we're going to react. Here's how it's going to impact my plan. And here's the real takeaway from everything. $1 million can require creativity, just depending on where you're at. $3 million requires planning complexity, but both require a strategy. So if you're sitting there with $1 million and feeling nervous, the point isn't that you can't retire. It's that you need to be intentional about the trade-offs, smarter with taxes and withdrawals, and be more intentional with matching everything up to your lifestyle. If you built 3 million or more, congratulations, that's great. But I wouldn't confuse that with being, quote, done. So now the game shifts to optimization. So taxes can easily become your largest expense. IRMA, RMDs matter. Sequence rules still matter. And good planning can save your family hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially, just depending on your individual situation. This is where good planning returns can rival market returns. And that's why no matter your number, the smartest move is to build a retirement plan around your vision of retirement, not around any arbitrary benchmark. Now that you understand the dramatic lifestyle differences between 1 million and 3 million in retirement, and how each wealth level creates completely different retirement realities, you can set appropriate targets based on your actual retirement vision rather than outdated millionaire expectations. And if you want help determining which target aligns with your specific retirement goals and individual factors, click the link below the video. There'll be a quick questionnaire. I promise it's really quick. Fill it out. I will send you back a personalized video giving you my thoughts on your retirement and giving you some steps that you can take to improve that. If I can help, just let me know. As always, thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.